Welcome back to Intentional Trading. If this is your first time here, you are welcome, but I must be honest with you. This is the fifth episode in the Mentorship Mastery Program, and what we are about to confront today rests on foundations already laid. I strongly urge you, before or after this session, to go back and engage episodes 1 through 4. Not casually, intentionally, because this series is not content, it is conditioning. This channel exists for a very specific kind of trader, not the hopeful, not the excited, not the reactive. This channel exists for traders who are tired of emotional cycles, tired of temporary breakthroughs, and tired of mistaking motivation for transformation. If that is you, then this space was designed for your mind. Before we proceed, do what intentional traders do. Pause, subscribe to the channel, like this session, and share it with a trader who keeps asking why their results never stabilize. That simple act is not for algorithms, it is for alignment. Now let us proceed. Today's episode will unsettle you if you are honest with yourself. It will disturb the version of you that still believes performance is a technical problem. And if you stay with me to the end, it will offer you something far more valuable than another strategy. It will offer you authorship. Most traders fail not because they lack information, but because they are divided. Divided between who they believe they are and how they behave under pressure. Divided between the image they carry of themselves and the identity their execution reveals. Divided between aspiration and embodiment. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer it silently, but truthfully. When you sit down to trade, who exactly is showing up? Not who you intend to be, not who you studied to become, not who you talk about in trading communities. Who actually shows up when price moves against you? Who takes control when uncertainty enters the room? Who clicks the button? Because that person, whether you like it or not, is your real trading identity. Here is the uncomfortable truth most traders never hear. You cannot trade what you have not become. You can imitate it, you can study it, you can fantasize about it, but you cannot consistently execute beyond your current identity structure. This is why so many traders experience short-lived breakthroughs. A few good weeks, a good month, then collapse. They call it discipline issues. They call it psychology. They call it bad luck. But the real issue is simpler and far more confronting. Their performance briefly exceeded their identity. And identity always corrects that imbalance. Performance is not sustained by desire. It is sustained by congruence. The market does not reward what you want. It reflects who you are. Let me slow this down, because this is where most people lose depth. Your identity is not what you say. It is not your trading plan. It is not your journal. Identity is your default behavior under pressure. Identity is the set of unconscious permissions you give yourself when no one is watching. Identity is the line you refuse to cross, and the one you cross without hesitation. You see, many traders carry a self-image that is far more advanced than their actual behavioral structure. They think of themselves as disciplined, but behave impulsively. They think of themselves as patient, but overtrade. They think of themselves as risk-aware, but emotionally bargain with stops. This internal contradiction creates constant friction, and friction drains clarity, drains confidence, drains consistency. You cannot build mastery on internal conflict. Let me make this personal for you. Think of the last trade you broke your rules on, not the one you justify, the one you know you violated. Ask yourself this honestly. Did it feel like a mistake, or did it feel familiar? Because mistakes feel foreign. Identity feels familiar. If breaking rules feels familiar, then it is not a mistake. It is alignment with your current identity. This is why affirmations fail traders. This is why motivation burns out. You cannot talk yourself into a new identity while behaving from an old one. The market is the most honest mirror you will ever face. It does not negotiate with self-image. It responds only to behavior, and here's where most trading education fails you. It teaches execution without transformation. It teaches rules without identity. It teaches what to do without addressing who must exist to do it consistently. So traders collect systems like costumes. They put one on, try to act the part, and when pressure rises, the costume falls off. What remains is the same untrained identity. Let me tell you something most mentors will not. You do not rise to the level of your strategy. You fall to the level of your identity. That is not poetry. That is structure. If your identity is reactive, your execution will eventually be reactive, even with the best model in the world. If your identity seeks certainty, you will sabotage probabilistic systems. If your identity is emotionally dependent on outcomes, you will violate risk. And here is the painful part. The market does not punish this, it exposes it. This is why two traders can trade the same model and produce opposite results. The difference is not intelligence, it is identity alignment. Now, stay with me, because this is not about shame, this is about responsibility. Identity is not discovered, it is authored. But before you can author a new identity, you must first confront the split between who you think you are and who you have trained yourself to be. Let me ask you another question. When you lose, who do you become? Defensive, self-critical, revenge-oriented, detached, avoidant? Those are not emotional reactions, they are identity responses. Most traders try to control behavior without redesigning identity. That is like trying to fix a shadow without touching the object casting it. You journal, but do not change self-permission. You set rules, but do not change self-trust. You visualize success, but do not retrain your nervous system. And so you return again and again to the same behavioral gravity. Let me be clear. Identity is not motivation. Identity is structure. It is the internal architecture that decides what feels natural, what feels allowed, and what feels impossible. If patience feels forced, you are not a patient trader yet. If discipline feels heavy, you are not a disciplined trader yet. If consistency feels exhausting, your identity is not aligned with your execution demands. This is not an insult, this is a diagnosis, and diagnosis precedes design. In the intentional trading framework, we do not ask, how do I trade better? We ask, who must I become so that correct trading becomes my default? That shift changes everything, because once identity aligns with execution, discipline disappears. Not because it is no longer needed, but because it is no longer resisted. You do not force yourself to be who you already are. This episode is not about giving you techniques. It is about stripping illusions. Because until the illusion of self-image collapses, identity authorship cannot begin. In the next part of this session, we will expose the silent gap between how traders see themselves and how they behave when risk is real. And many of you will recognize yourselves more clearly than ever before. Stay present. Do not intellectualize this. Let it confront you. We are just getting started. If you stayed with me after the first part, it means something inside you recognized itself. Not comfortably, but clearly. And clarity is dangerous to old identities. That is why most traders avoid it. Now, let us go deeper into the fracture that quietly ruins consistency, the gap between self-image and behavior. Every trader carries an internal story about who they are. Intelligent, disciplined, serious, long-term minded, professional. This story is not accidental. It is constructed from books read, mentors followed, screenshots saved, and moments of temporary success. Over time, the story hardens into a self-image. But the market does not interact with your story. It interacts with your nervous system. This is where the collapse begins. Self-image is aspirational. Behavior is conditioned. And under pressure, conditioning always overrides aspiration. Let me explain this in a way you cannot escape. When conditions are calm, most traders appear aligned. They journal, they wait, they speak with confidence. They believe they are improving. But trading is not tested in calm. It is tested in uncertainty, drawdown, missed entries, and sudden volatility. Pressure does not change you, it reveals you. So when price accelerates and your heart rate changes, when you hesitate on execution or chase confirmation, when you move stops or avoid valid setups, that is not a lapse in discipline. That is identity asserting itself. Many traders say, that wasn't me. Yes, it was. That was the unedited version. Here is the uncomfortable realization you must accept if you want mastery. Your repeated behavior under pressure is your true trading identity, not your intentions, not your knowledge, not your plans. This is why traders feel betrayed by themselves. They believe they are one person, yet observe another acting through their hands. That internal contradiction creates shame, frustration, and eventually self-distrust. And once self-distrust enters trading, execution collapses silently. Let me ask you something important. Do you trust yourself in the market? Not your model, not your analysis, yourself. Because if you hesitate, override, or second guess your own rules, the problem is not the rules. It is the relationship between your identity and your execution. Most traders are trying to operate systems that belong to a different identity tier. They want the behavior of a professional without the internal structure of one. They want consistency without stability. They want confidence without emotional containment. That mismatch creates constant strain. Think about this carefully. If your identity still seeks excitement, how will you execute boredom-based edge? If your identity seeks validation, how will you accept randomness? If your identity avoids discomfort, how will you sit through drawdown? You cannot. And this is why traders sabotage themselves right before alignment. Not because they are weak, but because their identity has not been updated to handle the new demands. Let me say this clearly. Growth without identity adaptation feels unsafe to the nervous system. When your results begin to change, your internal system panics because consistency requires stillness. And stillness feels like danger to an identity trained in chaos. So traders unconsciously return to familiar patterns, overtrading, interfering, forcing action, because chaos feels known. This is not stupidity. This is conditioning. Now listen carefully. This is one of the most important truths you will ever hear about trading psychology. You do not act according to what you believe is right. You act according to what feels permissible. And permission is granted by identity. If deep down you do not believe you are allowed to win consistently, you will violate success. If you do not believe you deserve stability, you will manufacture volatility. If you identify as someone who struggles but tries, you will unconsciously preserve struggle. The market does not argue with this. It simply reflects it. This is why affirmations fail. This is why saying, "I am disciplined," changes nothing. Because identity is not linguistic. It is embodied. It lives in response time. It lives in hesitation. It lives in impulse control. It lives in how quickly you abandon process when outcomes fluctuate. Let me confront another illusion. Many traders believe confidence precedes consistency, that once they feel confident, execution will follow. This is backwards. Confidence is not a prerequisite. It is a byproduct of identity behavior alignment. You do not wait to feel like a disciplined trader. You build a structure that enforces disciplined behavior until identity catches up. This is where intentional trading diverges from motivational psychology. We do not ask you to feel different. We ask you to behave differently, repeatedly, deliberately, structurally. Because identity is trained through repetition, not insight. Insight may wake you up, but repetition rewires you. Now pause for a moment and reflect. How many times have you understood what to do, but failed to do it? That gap is not intelligence. It is identity lag. You learned faster than you trained, and knowledge without embodiment creates internal tension. Most traders live in that tension permanently. They know better, but cannot do better, and eventually they stop trusting themselves altogether. This is why some traders prefer ignorance, because knowing and failing hurts more than not knowing at all. But you are not here for comfort. You are here for authorship. So let me show you where identity begins to shift. Identity changes when behavior becomes non-negotiable, not emotionally motivated, not outcome dependent, non-negotiable. When you remove choice from behavior, identity starts to reorganize. This is why rules alone are insufficient. Rules are still optional unless enforced by structure. And optional behavior never becomes identity. Let me give you an example. A trader says, "I am a risk-managed trader, but still occasionally doubles risk to recover losses." That trader does not have a risk-managed identity. They have a hopeful identity with moments of restraint. Identity is not what you do most of the time. It is what you do when it matters. One violation under pressure reveals more than 10 clean trades in calm conditions. This is why the market feels brutal, because it only tests identity at its weakest point. Now, here is where most people misunderstand identity work. They think it is about confidence, self-esteem, or mindset. It is not. Identity is a contract between what you allow yourself to do, what you forbid yourself from doing, and what consequences are enforced when lines are crossed. If there are no consequences, there is no identity, only preference. Professional traders are not more disciplined by nature. They are more constrained by design. Their environment, rules, position sizing, timing, and review processes remove the ability to act impulsively. Over time, the identity adapts to the structure. This is critical. Identity follows structure, not the other way around. Most traders wait to become disciplined so they can trade properly. Intentional traders trade properly so they can become disciplined. That inversion is everything. Now ask yourself this honestly. Does your current trading environment support the identity you claim to want? Or does it silently enable the identity you are trying to escape? Open access to charts, no execution delay, flexible risk rules, emotional exposure to P&L, no enforced downtime after losses. That environment does not build a professional identity. It preserves a reactive one. You cannot meditate your way out of structural contradiction. And until this is understood, traders will keep blaming themselves instead of redesigning their system. In the final part of this session, we are going to lay the foundation for identity authorship, not theory, not inspiration, design. We will talk about how identity is deliberately constructed, how behavior is engineered, and how traders stop being victims of their impulses and become authors of their execution. Do not rush ahead mentally. Stay with this, because the moment you see identity as something you build, not something you find, everything changes. Now we arrive at the turning point, not the motivational kind, the structural kind, the point where you either return to trading as you were, or you accept responsibility for becoming someone different. Everything you have heard so far leads to a single realization. Identity is not a personality trait. It is an architecture. And architectures are designed. Most traders drift into an identity. They inherit it from fear, from early losses, from social media narratives, from survival instincts. That is why it feels so stubborn. You did not choose it consciously, but you have been maintaining it through repetition. Authorship begins the moment you stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start asking, "What structure is producing this behavior?" This question changes your posture from victim to designer. Let me make this practical, because doctrine without application becomes philosophy, and philosophy without embodiment changes nothing. Identity is trained through constraint. Constraint creates consistency. Consistency creates trust. Trust stabilizes execution, and stable execution gives birth to identity. This is the chain most traders reverse. They seek trust before consistency. They seek consistency before constraint. They seek results before structure. Intentional traders reverse the order. They begin by removing freedom. Yes, removing it. Because freedom without structure is chaos masquerading as choice. When you reduce the number of decisions you can make in real time, your nervous system calms. When your nervous system calms, impulse loses power. When impulse loses power, behavior stabilizes. And when behavior stabilizes, identity begins to reorganize around reliability instead of reaction. This is how you become the trader you have been trying to feel like. Not by confidence, not by affirmation, by design. Identity authorship starts with one brutal question. What behaviors are absolutely forbidden, no matter how you feel? Until that list exists, identity remains negotiable. And negotiable identity never survives pressure. Professional identity is not defined by what you do. It is defined by what you refuse to do, especially when it is tempting. Refusal is power. Every time you do not take a trade you are not allowed to take, you are not missing opportunity. You are reinforcing identity. Every time you accept a loss without interference, you are not being passive. You are training authorship. Every time you walk away after execution instead of watching price, you are not avoiding responsibility. You are protecting structure. This is how the market stops being an emotional arena and becomes a procedural environment. Let me say something that may surprise you. Consistency is not heroic. It is boring. It is quiet. It is uneventful. And that is why most people cannot sustain it. Their identity is addicted to stimulation, not stability. So they sabotage stillness and call it intuition. But intuition only exists after structure has been internalized. Before that, it is just impulse wearing a sophisticated mask. Identity authorship requires humility. The humility to admit that your feelings are not guidance. The humility to accept that your current instincts were trained in chaos. And the humility to submit to process long enough for transformation to occur. This is not submission to a mentor. It is submission to design. And design does not care how you feel today. This is where many traders drop off, not because they cannot do this, but because it threatens their self-image. It demands the death of the romantic trader identity and replaces it with something quieter, sharper, and far more powerful. The trader who does not need to prove anything, the trader who does not chase validation, the trader who does not argue with probability, the trader who does not need to be right, only aligned. That trader is not born. That trader is constructed. And this channel exists for one reason, to help you construct that identity deliberately, not quickly, not emotionally, intentionally. If you have felt exposed in this episode, that is a good sign. Exposure precedes authorship. Awareness precedes change, and discomfort precedes discipline. Do not rush to fix anything today. Sit with what you have seen. Observe your behavior. Watch how quickly identity tries to defend itself. That observation alone begins the shift. In the next doctrine, we will move from identity awareness into identity enforcement. We will talk about how structure eliminates impulse, how rules become non-negotiable, and how the nervous system is retrained to trust process over emotion. This is where traders stop hoping and start becoming. If this episode challenged you, then you are exactly where you need to be. Stay with the series. Rewatch it. Share it with a trader who is still fighting themselves every session. And if you are ready to stop performing the role of a disciplined trader and start embodying one, then remain here. This channel is not growing an audience. It is building a class of intentional traders. I look forward to meeting you in the next doctrine. Until then, trade less, observe more, and remember this: you cannot trade what you have not become.